Hi everybody, welcome to your lecture on the characteristics and diversity of life. All living things exhibit 6 characteristics in combination, which means that they have all 6, and if they're missing even one, then they're not considered to be a living thing. They are organized in that they're made of cells, so all living things have one or more cells. Energy use and metabolism. They used energy, and we talked about in class that the ultimate energy source is the sun. Maintenance of internal consistency or homeostasis. We're going to talk about homeostasis more in depth, but it is basically maintaining a balance between the internal and external environment, and all of your cells and the organism as a whole is always trying to do that, and that explains a lot of the different activity that you'll see. Reproduction, either asexual or sexual, but all living things have to be able to reproduce. Growth and development, meaning that they grow in some way and develop, and even our cells on an individual basis do that. Mitosis and the cell cycle is the process of the cells dividing and multiplying. Response to a stimulus, irritability and adaptation. That just means that they can respond if something has been done, or evolve or adapt over time. So the first one, organization, we're going to talk about all 6 in a little bit more depth. Number 1, again, each level of biological organization exhibits emergent properties. So what are emergent properties? Well, this means that you start off with one cell. Here's an endothelial cell. And if you get more of them together, they form a sheet, and even more of them together, and they form a capillary. And your capillaries are your blood cells, and they are going to transport blood throughout your body. And that is an emergent property, meaning it emerged as more cells came together. So now, together as a unit, they have a different function than they have all by themselves. Number 2, energy use and metabolism. Metabolism is a biochemical reaction that acquires and uses energy. And we're going to talk about why do organisms need energy and how do organisms obtain energy. So also, when we are going over our lab and trying to figure out if that organism is alive, then we can try to figure out, does it use energy? All energy ultimately comes from the sun and is connected and flows throughout the system. So sunlight goes to the plants, who are the producers, and the plants take that energy and turn it into food. Sugar and a byproduct is oxygen. So that plant energy, some is going to be lost to the ecosystem in the form of heat. Consumers, or the organisms that eat the plants, obtain it by eating them. And then decomposers, or organisms that eat the consumers. So when you die and you decompose, there are organisms that do that, and they can obtain nutrients from them. Okay, homeostasis is the ability of an organism to maintain its internal environment despite conditions in the external environment. So an example of that is going to be human body temperature. If your body temperature is rising, if you're getting a fever, then your body is going to do things to try to change that. If you're exercising, then you're going to sweat. You don't want, your body temperature should be like 98.6, and it needs to stay right around that range. If it goes too high, it becomes dangerous. So your body is always going to do things to try to keep you near 98.6. So if you're getting too hot, you're going to start sweating. If you are getting too cold, you're going to start shivering to make that heat. Number 4 was reproduction. Organisms reproduce in different ways, either asexually, which is without sex, or sexually, which involves two parents. So asexually involves a single parent, and the progeny are genetically identical to the parent. So basically, that is nature's way of creating a clone. Your cells reproduce that way. Bacteria reproduces asexually. There are some fish and lizards and stuff that actually produce asexually as well. Lots of insects, amphibians do. Sexual reproduction involves two parents, and the progeny are genetically diverse, meaning that they are different. They're not exactly the same as the parent. And you know that from, mammals reproduce that way, sexual reproduction. And we are mammals. Our children are not the exact same as us. You are not a clone of your parent. Is it essential for an individual to reproduce? No. You, as a person or an individual, does not have to reproduce. Every single person does not have to reproduce. It is the population as a whole has to reproduce. If everybody in the human race stopped reproducing, then we would eventually all end. So the population has to reproduce. Individuals do not. Cell growth and development, number 5. The cell cycle is when the cell is just in its normal, everyday, day-to-day process, and it is not in the process of dividing. As soon as you go into the process of cell division, which means it's going to make a copy of itself, here you've got it splitting apart and two separate identical cells that they are exactly like the parent cell. So mitosis is the asexual reproduction of your cells, and they're dividing and changing and developing. Irritability and adaptation. Irritability is the immediate response to a stimulus. And your example of this here, Venus flytrap, as soon as the fly lands in there, it snaps shut, eats the fly. That's an immediate response to a stimulus. If you poke something, does it move? Adaptation is an inherited behavior or characteristic that enables an organism to survive and reproduce. So an example of an adaptation might be camouflage. That organism that you see right here, here's eyes, here's nose. That is actually the head of something hiding in sand. So it is very, very well camouflaged. That is going to be something that is over time developed to help that organism be able to survive, to reproduce, and pass on that trait to its offspring. It does need to be something that is can be genetically inherited. Over time, adaptations are modified by natural selection, which means that the individuals that survive to reproduce more, you are going to pass on more of their traits. So if this being camouflaged, being able to blend in, makes that organism more likely to be able to survive, to reproduce, to have children, then you're going to see more camouflaged individuals in the population. Life is always changing. On the level of DNA, change equals evolution. And evolution ultimately is the backbone of biology. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the diversity of life and a couple definitions for you. Biodiversity refers to the many different types of organisms on Earth. Bio meaning life, and diversity is, many different kinds. Taxonomy is the biological science that classifies life according to evolutionary relationships. This is what we're talking about in class right now. How do we classify? How do we organize organisms into different groups? The domain is the largest group of organisms. There are only 3 domains that all organisms that are alive exist in. And they are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Bacteria, archaea, and eukarya are the 3 domains, and underneath them you have 6 kingdoms. The domain bacteria contains the kingdom bacteria. Sometimes it's called eubacteria, EU bacteria. Archaea contains the kingdom Archaebacteria. And eukarya contains 4 kingdoms, and they are Protista, Plantae, Fungi, and Animalia. So protists, plants, fungus, and animals. These are the ones you're probably most familiar with plants, fungus, and animals being more so. If you take time to look at this chart, you're going to see many differences between the kingdoms. The first being that bacteria are unicellular. They are completely unicellular, whereas most protists, plants, fungus, and animal are multicellular. Some protists and some fungus can be unicellular as well. Bacteria lack a nucleus. All of these organisms, eukarya, actually eukarya means true nucleus, so they have a nucleus, every single one of them, and bacteria do not. Bacteria have distinct cell walls. Some protists have cell walls, plants have cell walls, and fungus have cell walls as well. Animals do not. And then we are going to get into some autotrophs and heterotrophs as well, but that's how they have their food. Some bacteria can produce their own food like a plant through photosynthesis. Those are called autotrophs. They automatically have their food. Organisms that are called heterotrophs, hetero, the word means different. So they're going to get it from a different food source, which means they have to eat their food or ingest it in a different manner. Some bacteria are heterotrophs. All animals are heterotrophs. They cannot produce their own food, so they have to consume it. All right, the classes, the biological classification from most inclusive to least inclusive. Inclusive means it includes a lot. So domain includes everything. There are 3 different domains. Then we go to kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Species being the most specific. It excludes everything except for that one type of organism. And a way to remember this is Dear King Philip came over for great spaghetti. That is what I use to remember it. You can use whatever you want. If you come up with something you think is great, share it with the class as long as it's appropriate. If you want to remember it however you want, but it's not appropriate, don't share it. Just keep it to yourself. As long as you remember it, I don't care what your sentence says. All right. How do we classify humans? This is how you are classified. Your domain is eukarya. Your kingdom is Animalia. So we have a nucleus and we're animals. Phylum Chordata means you have a backbone. Class Mammalia. So we're mammals. So we have hair. We produce milk. Order Primates. Okay, so we're in the same order as any other primate, like apes. Family, Hominidae. Genus and species, you've probably heard this, Homo sapiens. So we are considered Homo sapiens, with Homo being the genus and sapiens being the species. When you write a genus species name, you must write it like this, with genus being capitalized and species being lowercase. And if it is typed, then it's all italicized like it is here. If it is handwritten, it must be underlined. Okay? Well, thank you very much. Make sure you take your quiz, and I'll see you in class.